My name is Henrith. Silence from Brooke after my formal legal warning lasted exactly 24 hours. Then, the counterattack began, but it didn't come in the form of a legal rebuttal. It came through the telephone. I was middle of a complex spreadsheet at work when an unknown number flashed on my screen. It was Jason Liu, the new and flashy financial advisor my parents had tried to hire behind my back. He sounded nervous. He told me he was reviewing the Mitchell retirement structure and had seen draft forms attempting to appoint Brooke as a co-trustee. He noted that my name was listed as approving the changes, yet there was no signature. I informed him, in no uncertain terms, that I had approved nothing and that any claim otherwise was a fabrication. Jason sighed, admitting the family had given him the impression I was stepping away due to being overwhelmed. I told him to treat every future request as unauthorized, unless he saw my live signature in front of him. Shortly after, my cousin Megan called, her voice hushed and worried. She told me Brooke was spiraling on social media, posting vague quotes about abusive power and financial manipulation within families. Brooke was telling everyone who would listen that I was holding the family's money hostage because of a personal grudge. She was painting a picture of me as a cold, power-hungry tyrant who was punishing her parents for a simple mistake. I thanked Megan for the heads up and asked her to screenshot anything relevant. I wasn't going to roll around in the mud with Brooke. I was building a cage for her instead. The tension reached a breaking point when an email thread hit my inbox from our real estate agent, Susan. Brooke had actually emailed the agent, copying my parents and their lawyer, claiming that the triplex deal needed to move forward without me because I was suffering from personal mental health struggles. She wrote with a sickeningly sweet tone, asking the agent to respect my limitations. It was a calculated move to legally bypass me by claiming I was incapacitated. My response was immediate and surgical. I replied to the entire group, attaching my formal withdrawal from days prior. I stated clearly that I was not exiting due to mental health issues, but because I no longer consented to my credit or income being used by people who had discarded me via voicemail. I copied the lawyer and the financial advisor on the email, effectively closing the door on the house deal forever. Susan's reply was crisp. She would ignore Brooke's messages and only act on my instructions. Brooke had tried to use a scalpel to cut me out. I used a sledgehammer to collapse the entire floor she was standing on. That evening, I found a handwritten note from my mother taped to my apartment door. It was written on lined paper, pleading for me to call so they could fix this before it went too far. It was the first sign of genuine cracks in their narrative. They were starting to realize that without me, the walls were closing in. My phone buzzed again with another screenshot from Megan. Brooke had just posted, "Sometimes the most dangerous person in a family is the one who controls the money." I placed my mother's note next to my laptop, opened my family risk file, and watched the evidence pile up. Defense was no longer enough. If they wanted to play a game of scripts and stories, I was going to introduce them to the truth. The next morning, my mother sent a text asking for just 5 minutes of my time. No arguing. I agreed to a call. When she answered, I could hear my father in the background. They sounded exhausted. They admitted they had messed up with the voicemail, but then the real reason for their behavior came out. They claimed Brooke had told them I was planning to remove them from the LLC and the retirement accounts entirely. She had told them a vivid story about a conversation we allegedly had in a car after dinner, where I supposedly said I was tired of carrying them. I let out a cold laugh. I told them that on the night of that dinner I had taken my own car and left alone. There was no car ride. There was no conversation. My father swore under his breath and my mother went silent. They were beginning to see that they had been played. Brooke had manipulated their fears of losing their security to turn them against the person who was actually providing it. I told them that we were done with whispers and speakerphone apologies. I demanded a face-to-face meeting, all 4 of us in the same room, with documents. No excuses. The meeting took place the following evening in my parents' living room. The air was thick with resentment. My parents sat on the sofa, looking defeated, while Brooke perched in an armchair clutching a tissue like a stage prop. I sat down and placed a thick folder on the coffee table. Along with my phone, I made it clear nothing was off the record. If anyone lied, it would be documented. Brooke immediately tried to play the victim, accusing me of being hostile. I ignored her and looked at my parents. I asked them to recount exactly what Brooke had told them. As they spoke, Brooke tried to double down on her car ride story. That was when I opened the folder. I pulled out printed statements, GPS logs from my car, and Brooke's rideshare receipts from that night. I showed them that at 10:13 p.m., I was at a gas station across town while Brooke was already at their house. There was no overlap. There was no conversation. Brooke's face went pale. She tried to pivot, saying she might have remembered the night wrong and that she was just trying to help because she thought I needed a break. I didn't stop there. I laid out the emails to the real estate agent, the draft documents Jason had found, and the screenshots of her social media posts. One by one, I dismantled every lie she had told over the last 2 weeks. I showed my parents that while they were mourning the loss of their daughter, Brooke was busy trying to forge signatures to take over their future. My father looked at Brooke with a look of pure realization. He told her, "The truth doesn't fall apart when you hold it next to a receipt. Yours did." My mother turned to me, her eyes wet with tears. She admitted they had always seen me as the strong one and Brooke as fragile, so they had protected her while pushing all the responsibility onto me. They realized that, in their attempt to protect the weak daughter, they had tried to destroy the one who actually cared for them. The script Brooke had written was burning in front of their eyes, and they were finally seeing the person standing in the smoke. The silence that followed my father's words felt permanent. Brooke sat frozen, her eyes darting between us like a trapped animal, trying to calculate which version of herself would save her now. When she finally spoke, the victim act was gone, replaced by a sharp defensive snap. She asked if I was happy now that I'd made our mother cry and paraded my little packet of papers around. I didn't flinch. I told her this was never about tears. It was about the fact that she had tried to weaponize my own family against me to steal a life she hadn't earned. My father, looking older than I had ever seen him, asked me what I thought should happen next. Brooke was outraged that he was even asking for my input, but I ignored her. I told them that if they wanted me out of the family business, I was fine with that. I would step back from being the default safety net. But that meant the back doors were being welded shut. No one was going to use my name, my credit, or my labor ever again. I demanded that Brooke be stripped of any perceived access or influence over our shared assets immediately. My mother started to protest, saying Brooke didn't have formal access, but I cut her off. I pointed out that Brooke had been sitting in on meetings and talking to advisors as if she were already in charge. That era was over. My father agreed. He looked Brooke in the eye and told her there would be no more talking to advisors on their behalf and no more pretending to speak for me. Then my mother said something that surprised me. She suggested we make it official. No more shared accounts, no more promised loans for Brooke's half-baked business ideas, and no more protection for a daughter who had spent years lying to them. She admitted that by coddling Brooke's fragility, they had only fueled her entitlement to money that didn't exist until I built it. She asked me to rewrite everything, the LLC, the retirement accounts, the property holdings, based on what I knew was right, not what they said in the heat of a fight. I was stunned. They were asking me to take the wheel again, but this time, they were surrendering the map. Brooke tried one last desperate move, a fast-paced pivot from outrage to pleading. She cried, she apologized, and then she asked for a small role in the LLC, maybe managing social media, just to prove she could contribute. A year ago, I might have fallen for it, but I looked at her and said no. I told her that if she wanted to prove she could build something, she needed to start from zero, just like I did. You don't get to contribute by wiring yourself into a finished skyscraper. In the weeks that followed, the revenge wasn't a single dramatic moment. It was a quiet, legal restructuring. I worked with the lawyers and advisors to make the Mitchell Holdings LLC bulletproof. We updated the operating agreements to state that no new members could be added without unanimous, written consent. There was no longer a line where Brooke's name could ever be penciled in. I didn't destroy her, I simply removed the leverage she thought she had over my life. I eventually closed on that triplex, but the terms were different. My parents live in the bottom unit now, protected by a life estate clause I wrote, so they will always have a roof over their heads. I live in the unit above them. We cook together on weekends, and we talk about money with the lights on now. No more whispers, no more mystery. When Brooke reaches out to them asking for money to pay off a credit card, my mother shows me the text, then turns her phone over and says, "We can't fix this for her." Brooke ended up in a small apartment across town, still chasing influencer dreams that never quite materialize. People have started to notice that her stories always require a villain, but for the first time in my life, I am not playing that role. I didn't seek to ruin her. I just chose to stop saving her. As I look out from my balcony over the Denver skyline, I'm no longer angry. I'm clear. I learned that you can love your family and still refuse to be their insurance policy when they gamble with the truth. You can forgive someone without handing them the keys to your house. If someone ever tells you that you're out and shouldn't come back, believe them. Step back, lock the doors, and ask yourself what you should have stopped giving them access to a long time ago. Saying no isn't revenge, it's self-respect. And in the end, that is the only asset truly worth protecting. At 30 years old, I've built a career out of pessimism. Working for a major fintech firm in Denver, my entire job revolves around predicting worst-case scenarios and protecting millions of dollars from human error and greed. I am paid to see the disaster coming before it hits. Yet nothing in my professional training prepared me for the 10-second voicemail that effectively detonated my family. It was a Tuesday afternoon, a mundane blur of risk reports and lukewarm coffee. When I tapped play on the notification, I expected a quick check-in from my mother. Instead, her voice came through flat, icy, and transactional. The tone someone uses to cancel a gym membership, not discard their eldest daughter. The words were a verdict. "You're out. Don't come back. We're moving on without you." No explanation, no emotion. Just a sudden cold exile. For a long moment, I sat in the silence of my office, the sound of my own heartbeat thundering in my ears. But then, the part of my brain that locks down corporate assets for a living took over. I didn't cry, and I didn't dial her number to beg for an explanation. I sent a single, one-word text, "Okay." Then I moved faster than they ever thought possible. I immediately logged into the family LLC, a structure I had built from the ground, up to manage our rental properties and a new triplex we were days away from closing on. I revoked every permission tied to my name. I locked the credit lines they were planning to use and froze the transfers. Within minutes, I called the real estate agent and officially withdrew my name and financial backing from their upcoming house deal. Without my credit and my income, that deal was dead in the water. Finally, I placed a hard freeze on the retirement accounts I had structured for them so they couldn't be drained or altered in a panic. By the time I finished my coffee, I had dismantled every easy financial path my family thought they had through me. I expected that to be the end of it, but the storm was only beginning. By the next morning, my phone was a graveyard of 46 missed calls and a frantic voice. Ale from the family lawyer, Evan Coleman. His voice was tight, sounding like a man who had just realized his clients had lied to him. I actually found myself laughing as I listened. They didn't realize that the problem wasn't my absence, the problem was everything I took with me when I left. As I sat in my apartment that morning watching the coffee drip, the messages kept flooding in. My mother was now claiming it was a misunderstanding. My father was calling me kiddo and promising we could fix whatever happened. It was a stark contrast to the previous day's clarity. Yesterday, I was out. Today, I was the only person who could save their financial futures. I checked my building's security feed and saw my father standing outside the glass doors, looking up at my unit with his hands shoved deep into his pockets. He didn't ring the buzzer. He just stared for a moment and then walked away. My chest tightened, but I pushed the sentimentality down. When someone shows you how easily they can cut you out, you don't owe them comfort when the blade swings back toward them. At work, the atmosphere was just as heavy. My colleague Jenna noticed my intensity immediately. When I told her my parents had tried to fire me from the family business, she scoffed. "Do they realize you are the family business?" she asked. Her advice stayed with me. Once money is involved, everyone starts performing. I needed to ensure every move I made was documented, clean, and defensible in a courtroom. The pieces of the puzzle started coming together when I received a text from a cousin asking if I was overwhelmed. That wasn't my word, it was a label. It sounded exactly like something my younger sister, Brooke, would say. Brooke had recently lost her marketing job and had been whispering about streamlining the LLC and freeing up equity during Sunday dinners. While my parents were blowing up my phone, Brooke was suspiciously silent. She was the puppeteer, waiting off stage to see if her plan to replace me had worked. A few days later, the overwhelmed narrative was everywhere. I ran into an old family friend, Tom, at a coffee shop. He looked at me with pity, mentioning how sorry he was that work pressure and my mental state had forced me to pull out of the triplex deal. I realized then that this wasn't just a family spat. This was a smear campaign. Brooke was laying the groundwork to paint me as unstable so she could seize control of the assets I had worked years to protect. I reached out to Daniel Hayes, the financial advisor who helped me set up the original LLC. His response confirmed my fears. My mother had already been asking him how to add a new managing member to the accounts, Brooke, and had even presented documents where my signature line was conspicuously blank. It was a backdoor attempt to hijack the company. Finally, Brooke broke her silence. She sent a scathing text accusing me of freaking everyone out and making a mess of the house deal. I didn't give her the satisfaction of an angry reply. Instead, I went to my laptop and began a family risk file. I archived the voicemail, the texts, the records of Brooke's lies, and the proof of my own financial contributions. If Brooke wanted to tell a story where I was the villain, I was going to counter it with a story backed by receipts, timestamps, and cold, hard facts. I sent a formal notice to Brooke and the rest of the family. Any attempt to alter the LLC or use my name without written consent would be treated as fraud. I wasn't playing the role of the hurt daughter anymore. I was the risk manager, and the Mitchell family was now a high-risk liability.